family memorials. We should create unique and natural ways to review with our children and grandchildren how God has met our needs and blessed us as an extended family. Here's Gene to explain this principle.
Let me take you into this passage in Joshua chapter 4, beginning with verse 19. The people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and camped at Gilgal on the eastern limits of Jericho. And then Joshua set up in Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken from the Jordan. In a moment, I want to talk about Gilgal because that's a very significant place. That's a very significant name. But let me just give you a little background. The children of Israel are really perched on the edge of Canaan, the promised land. They're on the east side of the Jordan. And they have come up to that particular place, and God is going to lead them into the promised land. Moses has died. Joshua has taken his place. God has reassured Joshua that he will be able to lead these people because God said, I won't forsake you. I'll be with you. I will help you. I'll encourage you. And God gives them very specific instructions to be sure to personalize God's word in his heart and then to teach the people and to lead them. So they're ready to enter into Canaan. And basically, as the story goes from the context, the priests are to carry the Ark of the Covenant, and they are to go to the Jordan, and when their feet enter the Jordan River, something very unique is going to happen. There are 12 men that have been chosen, each from the tribe of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. And God is speaking through Joshua now to these men and what they are supposed to do. They're going to go into the middle of this river, but the amazing thing, just like the Red Sea, God is going to roll back the Jordan River. This, by the way, is at flood tide. The river is high. Back in those days, it was huge. And it says that the waters rolled back all the way to the city of Adam, which was a number of miles. You can imagine this incredible scene, just like the 40 years before when they crossed the Red Sea and God parted the Red Sea. And God is doing something very, very special. Now, if you go back in the context, you will find that when Joshua was out there in the middle of that river, on dry ground, because God miraculously did this. They weren't up to their knees in mud. They were on dry ground. And right there in the middle of the Jordan River, Joshua took 12 stones and piled these stones up right there in the middle of the river. And I believe that he did that for a very special purpose. I think that when the waters receded and when the river was at a lower level, those stones would emerge. They would be there. And that would be a reminder of what God did, not just to the children of Israel, but to the Canaanites as well. But there were 12 more stones. And that is that these 12 men, each were to take a stone, take them from the river. Now, these are additional stones. And they were to take these stones up to Gilgal. And that's what we read here. Joshua set up in Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken from the Jordan River. Now, let me say a word about Gilgal. Basically, the word Gilgal means circle. And this was a Canaanite pagan worship center. And they would have stones in a circle that was symbolizing their pagan worship. But God said, I want you to take 12 stones, Joshua, from the middle of this Jordan River. I want these 12 men to carry these stones, and when they get to Gilgal, they are to pile those stones up as a memorial to me. Now, the interesting thing is that the stones, in a sense, were neutral. Nothing wrong with stones. It's how you used those stones. And at Gilgal, the pagans put them in a circle to their pagan gods. And I believe that God, in a marvelous way, said, I'm going to take these stones, which, by the way, I created, Joshua, to be used for a unique purpose, and that's to worship me. I want you to pile these stones and point them upward. Not in a circle, but pile them up, pointing to me, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's very significant in itself, the concept of Gilgal, the circle, but now the stones are piled high, pointing to God, who did this, who brought them not only through the wilderness, but brought them there to the Jordan River, rolled back that river, as it were, and took them across into the land of Canaan. So we read, then Joshua set up in Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken from the Jordan, and he said to the Israelites, now here's the memorial. When your children ask the fathers in the future, what is the meaning of these stones? These stones that are piled up there at Gilgal. You should tell your children, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. That was part of the miracle. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, just as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which of course was 40 plus years ahead of time, before that, where he led them out of Egypt. The Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we'd crossed over. Another big miracle, 40 years before. Now, another miracle. And I think it's significant that God was honoring Moses, in a sense, as the leader when he put his rod over the sea and the waters separated there at the Red Sea. God is doing the same thing here. He's got a message to the children of Israel. Joshua is now your leader. I have vested in him authority. And as we saw in our last session together, God said to Joshua, I'm going to honor you this day. But Joshua, as a mature man of God, told the children of Israel, today God is going to be honored. Not me, but God. And that's a marvelous testimony to Joshua as a leader, a mature leader, a godly leader. This is so, and he goes on now to tell the purpose as to why these memorial stones are there, why they're to talk to the children of Israel, their offspring. This is so that all the people of the earth may know that the Lord's hand is mighty. Now, there's a purpose beyond even their own families. The purpose relates to the people over there in Jericho who are watching all of this take place. The people in Ai, which many of us pronounced Ai, in Hebrew it's I. The people in Ai, they're watching. The people who are sent spies from all the other places in Canaan are watching this incredible event. This is a purpose that is beyond just the children of Israel. Why did God choose the children of Israel in the first place? To be a witness of who God is. And so he has a message to the world. This is a great evangelistic statement in the Old Testament. That the people of the earth, the Canaanites, and all the people of the earth may know that the Lord's hand is mighty. God is God. But here's the second purpose. And so that you may always fear the Lord your God as my people. And I want you to share this story with your children and your grandchildren, that they will always remember who I am, that I am God. So, in Ephesians 6:4, in the whole context of what we see in the Old Testament, Paul says to the Ephesians, and fathers, don't stir up anger in your children, but bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. And what a powerful statement that is. So we see this principle carrying right over into the New Testament, and we also see how this impacted the Apostle Paul as an apostle with his missionary team. We see this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, where he draws on this father concept as a minister, as a pastor, as a church planter. He says, and as you know, like a father with his own children. See, that's a message that comes back to those of us who are in ministry particularly, because we, as men particularly, represent God the Father to those we're ministering to. It's just not the father with his children, it's the pastor with his people. And so that carries over. This principle is very much related to all aspects of life and communication. As you know, like a father with his own children, we encouraged, we comforted, we implored each one of you to walk worthy of God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. So let me state the principle again before we look at the application question. We should create unique and natural ways to review with our children and our grandchildren how God has met our needs and blessed us as an extended family. Family memorials. And so the question for reflection and response is, what are some contemporary memorial stones, as it were? What are some contemporary memorial stones we can have in our own home environments to help us as parents remind our children that it is God whom we worship, and it is He who has provided us with both our spiritual and our material blessings? And it's really interesting, as I was reviewing this passage, and as I was personally interacting with this question in relationship to memorial stones in my own background, all of a sudden, a phrase went through my mind that I saw when I was just a little boy, after I learned to read at age 6 and 7 and 8. And up on the wall of our home, in our living room, where we would frequently eat dinner, was a statement that popped right out at me in my memory from years ago. The unseen guest at every meal. The unseen guest at every meal. And then as I searched a little deeper in my mind, basically the opening part of that is Christ is the head of this home, the unseen guest at every meal. And then I think it goes on to say, the invisible one who hears every conversation, something of that nature. But I thought, that was a memorial stone hanging right there on the wall, as it were, in our home, because it reminded me, as a young boy growing up, that Jesus Christ is in this home, and at every meal he is the unseen guest. That impacted me. The other thing that impacted me was to see and hear my father pray at the beginning of the meal. I can still hear him pray. But the interesting thing about in our home is that at the end of the meal, Dad would again pray. That was part of the custom, it was part of the culture. And by the way, as children, we stayed there until he prayed at the end of the meal. I'm not suggesting that you have that kind of regiment in today's culture and system and so forth, but it was really interesting that combined with the fact that Jesus Christ is the unseen guest at every meal, and you combine that with his prayer at the beginning of the meal, his prayer at the end of the meal, was a reminder that this was a provision from God, and that God was there. Jesus was there. And I didn't understand everything there is to know about the Trinity, and that God and Jesus are one, but that eventually became clear to me as I learned more and more about the Bible. So I'm thankful for that memorial stone, but it's simple, isn't it? That's a simple memorial stone. But it was one that impacted me in a very, very significant way.